Good evening, everybody. System Chalk here with the 147th episode of House of Light, the expansion to Book of Hours, playing as the archaeologist with the Sandscar Journal. I am the librarian of Hush House, and this journal will record what arose from my crime and my curse. The archaeologist's dearest wish when they came to the house was to record a history where their crime could be forgiven or redefined, but you can complete the game by recording any history. You might wish to begin your studies with the Skolakosophy wisdom. I opened a tomb and found too late that it was a prison. The plague that I released is now my shadow, or perhaps I am its reflection. It is too late to set matters right, but it is never too late to protect the future from the past. In Hush House I can do no harm. Perhaps I can even make amends. So, we have a bit of work ahead of us today. So the big one that I want to do right now is line up all of the memories that I'm going to use for Tridesma Hyra. So I seem to remember thinking that I could potentially generate a stolen secret, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought that perhaps I was making the mistake of thinking that I could make a secret threshold. I know you can make secret thresholds. I don't know about stolen secrets. But anyways, we don't need to worry too much about it because I've got my other desks and elements to work with. So I'm going to go down my list. So the first one that I noticed here is contradiction. So I'm trying to remember if I had done observations in the Peacock Door, if we're on to an Exorcist Field Manual. I actually think we maybe even finished Exorcist Field Manual and we're on to Honey Comprehensive Guide, but I'll do an Exorcist Field Manual just to feel better about myself. Next up is Salt. So we will apply a Tryst to that, although that's going to be a bit of a precious one until we lock in the Tridesma Hyra. So I'm trying to remember, I think we might be on to Deaths of the Moon. Actually, I think we read that and we're on to Kukurbit Prisoner Records, but fair enough. On to Gossip. Now, this might be something that we get from Denzel, who I think we're already hiring. But again, I'm operating on the assumption here that we just want to queue up everything to be ready to go. So we're on to the Queens of the Rivers. This is Ambrose's desk, right? So we should be able to get away with a knock here. And the Vagabond desk, we are looking for stolen secrets, so that's just deaths and their evasions. Again, unless I have some sudden revelation. Of course, we may get that from Denzel too. And then finally, Satisfaction. So we can use Nana's desk for that. We could also technically use the Health. And if we did Callicite Supplications, we're on to the Berry Book. Unfortunately, I already used Kilisimi, so we're on to Journey to the Grove instead. All right, so that's it for Tridesma Hyra. We should have everything that we need from that generation. What we're going to do now, I'm going to try and use Drums and Dances to generate... Yeah, we can get a Savage Hymn out of that. So I'm going to start marking these two. I'm curious if I can sneak in... Actually, there's a couple things I can do here. So we can use the bells. And that'll get me a Wistful Air. And I'm curious if I can sneak in a Cheerful Ditty out of the organ. One must practice slowly, then more slowly, and finally slowly. Camille Saint-Saëns. Shoot. A little ahead of myself there. Okay. Don't feel good about it, but... There's the cheerful ditty. So we're already generating a confounding parable. I don't want to get too... I don't want to go too far on that front. But what we can do with the remaining desks is generate I guess I only have one more. We can generate the storm. Or is there... Bittersweet Certainty is slightly better, because that's not something that Denzel can make. Actually, funnily enough, I think the Bittersweet Certainty is something that I could have generated on my own. But that's fine. We'll learn to live with that. Okay, I think all the pieces are on the board, so we've got a little bit of a blockage just in the sense that there's more that I could be working with right now. I'm trying to think. I could try and generate a taste using the consider verb. What I think I'll do instead, though, is I do kind of want to catalog these books. So we'll catalog a Dawn period book. This book was probably written around the time of Hush House's Dawn period, sometime before the end of the first millennium, commonly reckoned. If I examine it, I can learn more about what knowledge it might contain. So I'll have 3 of those to deal with. I'm also going to try and restore a bit of order by putting the radical measure. And I'll even go crazy and put the Shaven Lock Tantra in place. So let's try and reorder these. Wait a minute. It's a VAC text. I guess it doesn't really matter. I should probably be doing this by difficulty, but all right, that's fine. Yeah, I'll work with that. Actually, the last thing that I could be you know what, okay. I do have a few plates spinning. One last thing I was thinking of is I could maybe start preparing something for the salon, because I haven't really thought about who I might invite. But let's maybe just work out, the levels first, and once I feel like I've got it in the bag, then we can sink the surplus into some cooking. Speak to Denzel, he might even reply. So the nice to haves for today will be a trip to Crowcross Sands and the Moor. We will also we'll also consider cooking as an option. But the one requirement for today, above all, is not to have any leftover no leftover no leftover memories, or sorry, lessons. The Voyages of Furnish and of Oriol, the impossible travels of a sea captain in the late Phoenician era, suppressed throughout recorded history by those who read it were said to disappear. So I don't think we've actually settled on where sea stories are going, so this will be turned into the to read pile again. Unless, I'll just double check, but I'm pretty sure sea stories is an open candidate. I think at this point we're in a good spot to just kind of keep cataloging these works, at least until we can start leveling up some skills. And I'm using the metal here just because it seems to be the one that can't get afflicted. At least I've never seen an afflicted metal, and I've done this enough times where I think foresight doesn't really help me, but that's not a problem. But yeah, I'm willing to say that at the very least, the risk to metal is so rare that it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. We also have quite a bit of metal, so, and the fact that it doesn't get, basically the fact that it isn't afflicted when you go and do the when you do the labors during Numa makes me think that it's one that just doesn't get affected. An Exorcist's Field Manual, a practical guide to troublesome dead, grounded in theory, but with a clear focus on their disposal by the redoubtable Detective Austieri Wheelock of the Suppression Bureau. The dead usually avoid light as the most immediate manifestation of eternity, which has no place for death. However, those dead uplifted by gold, that is to say touched by an actinic theoplasma, happily bought about in daylight and are perhaps strongest at noon. If you are dead but uplifted by green, that's the Ring-Use blessing. The crown growth offers a similar but nastier benefit. This is how burgeoning risen come about, but there are different degrees of sentience and freedom depending on which growths are involved. The consciousness of one uplifted by green is always greatly altered, though they never really seem to be the same person. They may have dregs of their original souls, but these are often replaced by something else. The upshot, invariably, is that they need to be set firmly on fire. As I used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. This is definitely a case where I want to keep refreshing the shaft. The Queens of the Rivers, a surreal contemporary play by the enigmatic Monica Medina, in which the Queens of the Rivers are murdered one by one. The Queen of the Vistula is poisoned, the Queen of the Dnieper chokes on a fishhook, the Queen of the Tagus is burnt alive. The culprit, it transpires, is the audience. The surviving queens are directed to execute whatever audience members do not escape. A surprisingly lucid epilogue suggests that the correspondence of river names with historical events does provide clues to secret histories behind our own. Deaths and Their Evasions. Father Stanislav John Schaller writes of the means and limitation of passage between the orders of the Mansus. No long names, ours. Unusually, Father John has written this book in Fucine, for, he says, especial secrecy. He speaks very cautiously of the exceptions that can sometimes be made to the edicts of Chancel and Calyptra, and hints at the means by which he successfully returned a lantern long to flesh. Schaller mentions most cautiously of all that he has been permitted to see a book that speaks more deeply on the matter, but that it was surrendered into the shadow of a covenant stone of the Watchman's Tree. It can be retrieved if the 99th wink is reserved under the edict's liminal. The Deaths of the Moon, a historical tract on various forms of survival after death. When the heart no longer beats, the grail may keep the spirit in the body, and an appetite is indicated to sustain. Alukites are the best known, but not the only of this nature. This is the waning moon mode. The full moon mode is the intensification of one element of the soul to the point where ordinary sustention is unstable. Our protector, the generous of hosts, began of this nature, and its generosity remains ungentle. It is possible for the body's health or the heart's core to outpace the other elements, so that a static mode becomes impossible and growth proceeds in dramatic stages until balance remanifests. Savage Hymn, Harsh on the Tongue. So this is for the separate collection. I'll be humming this for a while, and so will anyone else who happens by. Confounding parable, it fits fairly tidily in the mind as long as you turn it sideways. Cheerful ditty, diddly tiddly tum ti diddle tum. A Journey to the Grove. Black Ellie, who much later became Damascene matriarch at the Sisterhood of the Knot, recounts her journey to the Grove of Green Immortals. In the Grove, Ellie meets with an entity identified as Three Faces, Nine Colors, who may have become her lover. Three Faces is a name of the Applebright, the nowhere hour of youth, healing, and mutation. It offers Ellie a form of eternal youth to take back west with her, which she rejects for certain reasons. She does promise, however, to renew their acquaintance in the season when the Applebright is the witch, not from sentiment, but rather grandly to ensure the continuity of the histories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 7. I'm 1 short, though. Let it rise in head and heart. Wistful air, a half sorrowful music, of half pleasant longing. Ah yes, Musgrave sketches. Musgrave, 4th Baron Brankrug, was widely mocked as the Bleating Baron in the Lamb de Wolf, but these sketches reveal a complex, somber inner life. Art begins in colors, grows dappled, finally is either mostly darkness or mostly light. Musgrave discusses the temptation of the perfectly minimal palest painting. He has so far managed to resist this temptation, but does guiltily describe success in using sights and sensations with winter aspect to create first a chilly elixir from flowers, which he believes he can refine further into a final pigment. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've missed something. Oh, confounding parable, right. Okay, so the tricky part for... Hang on. Right, sorry, I'm using this to read a book. So I've got 1 minute. I should also set these aside again. So Arab for Trades Mahira. To Whist. So I think Storm is fair game now. I can't remember where we were on this. I think we're on to Demotu. Feeling a little more comfortable using the Tryst, but it still feels a bit weird. So we're good for the Geminiad. So Regret and Hindsight are up next. I'm trying to remember where we were in the grand scheme of things. I'll do on the white. Hindsight. I think it's this batch, right? So I think we might be 7 shards. But I'm going to do ablations and iron. I do these rarely enough that it's not immediately in my head which of these I've done before. Salt's already spoken for. I apparently wrote down Solace twice. Shame on me. Okay, that should at least get us started. Everything else will be a duplication. The Book of Masks, Athena Vanna's work on the rogue hour called the Vagabond, who is also known as the Laughing Thrush, the Centipede, the Pilgrim, and by many other names, or as Vanna has it, Masks. Okay, that's a 14, so that probably goes closer to the end here. Goes all the way to the end here. And we have enough time to do one more. Well, we also have one more book, so we'll finish cataloging all of them with the metal. We should still have one left over to do other things with. And then the rest of today is entirely dedicated to leveling up the various skills. So I have a couple of tricks that I can do to try and make the leveling a little more efficient, but I may not need them. Oh, there's the Hindsight. Nothing I can really do to preserve that, unfortunately, but that's if you look at this, we're doing fine in terms of elements of the soul. We'll definitely be able to read everything out of the books, even if things don't turn out with Denzel. The one thing I'm slightly worried about is it might get a little complicated to figure out what the memories from the various books will be. So there'll probably, if the worst case scenario is 2 vanish at the same time, and then I need to distinguish which is which in terms of the books, but again, I can sort that out later. And we have got witchworms as the sun his course. All right, so we're going to put this in the quarantine zone. We're leveled up enough that we should be able to handle, we should be able to get a 7 winter infestations handled. I'm trying to remember which of these was good with infestations. That was for keeper skin. I actually had this all written down, and then I think I got rid of it. All right, that's a start. The funny thing is, I don't think we've got infestations with winter. So in a pinch, I can do... I can use the Wormwood Dream, but we'll save that for later. It's not an urgent requirement right now. It also gets me Sickle and Eclipse, so that might have been nice for leveling up Edict Martial, but we don't have the same urgency for it, so... We'll now sit and wait for the memories to come in. One thing that's also kind of nice is that as we take sights and sensations up to 9, I can use the sunny day. Okay, there's another hindsight. So I have a little bit of a leg up for the final part of the puzzle. Okay, so one of these had confounding parables. The Skeleton Songs, poems of greedy delight composed by the possibly pseudonymous Arbella Dusk, the rumored heiress turned madam turned poetess. In Arbella's introduction, she explains that the book was to be illustrated, but that the Suppression Bureau would not permit it. She hints that the illustration still exists somewhere. The book is dedicated to Sir Parzival of the Red Cup. The 26 delightful fruits, the 7 chastisements, the 9 gardens, the 4 regrets. So, beguiling melody. Resurgences and emergences. So we finally have a companion to Intimations of Skin. Have a little variety for whenever we want to generate that now. Let's get the other book. The Serenity of the Black Wood. An allegorical history of the House of Leith, which it is here implied was inspired by the centipede. Serrano Blackwood is an occult alias to this day. The proverbial footloose gathers travelers in a wood and leads them through, but abandons them part way. They find themselves beset by glorious monsters. The travelers discover they can survive if they close their eyes. They adopt a closed eye as their sign, and that they can go unnoticed if they drink from the clear, cold streams. They never forget that proverbial footloose, the centipede, but they never forgive her either. So there's the Sacralamea. There's the confounding parable. So again, we'll make sure we add that to the right area. Ah! All right, and the remainder. De motu corporum veditorum. The author rejoices in the name of Abelard Hubris, and the title might be translated as On the Forbidden Motions of Bodies, evidently a reference to Newton's De motu corporum published some 20 years previously. Hubris' thesis, that stars, planets, and other bodies are proxies or even essences of the hours, and that conjunctions and occlusions reveal the outcome of our intrigues in the mansus. Hubris declares that the Great Comet of 1577 was the physical embodiment of the hour-named Madrigad, that it disintegrated, but its fragments gravitate to bone marrow, where they can be located even now. He insists that aronoscopic techniques can be used with essential periost and sufficient sky to create a talisman centrifugic. Better now. I think we'll just turn that into some more money. It's not much work on offer in Brandkrug, but I can find 6 pence worth of odd jobs. On the White, Solomon Husher writes perhaps allegorically of winter and its long, slow, doomed romance with the sun. The epigraph is sunset at noon. On closer investigation, the work seems to be a theory of aesthetics, or perhaps a set of warnings about the dangers of painting. Husher writes distractedly about his suspicion of colors and his yearning for death. He hints at a great work he has envisaged or begun, where the palest of paintings will enthrall the world. He returns again and again to certain compelling phrases, which he claims are the secret words of winter. Oblations in Iron, a monster-hunting initiate of the hour named the Colonel, who identifies herself as Little Sophia, records the exhibits she has rendered to the War Museum in the Mansis. Little Sophia has never visited the War Museum, or even the Mansis in person, and evidently has no desire to do so. She mixes ink, which incorporates the remains of her prey, writes her records in that ink, and then burns them before the Colonel's altar. It is essential, however, to permit no drop of the ink thereby obtained to enter any portal of the body, even a break in the barrier of the skin. Should any fragment of the worm remain viable, it might enter thereby, and the hunt's ultimate conclusion be melancholy indeed. And the Geminiad Volume 1, a fragile manuscript illuminated with twin shapes of sad and luminous beauty, and with all the phases of the moon. It might be as old as the 7th century, but the language, few seen, is much older. The cover is tooled goatskin, decorated with garnet. These pages outline the nature and the doctrines of an hour that weaves together the willing, an hour that is sought beneath the moon and at the water's edge. The sister and witch. The language is willful, naughty, poetic. It will take some untangling. The first volume of the Geminiad reminds us that the sister and witch has been known to manifest as the witch and sister, and that this face is always hungry, while the other face may heal. It implies connections between the sister and witch and the hours of the upper Mansis, especially the lunar hour called the Menascate, but it is ambiguous on whether the sister and witch is a Mansis hour proper, and it speaks at length about the sadness of the two who are one, the sadness that remains from their time as flesh. All right, so let's tidy up our elements of the soul. Now, the way I think I'm going to handle this here is that we know the hungriest of the skills is going to be sights and sensations. And there's a little bit of overlap in terms of what we need, but what I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to take sights and sensations first. That's going to take 30 seconds. And then I'm going to level up Tridesma Hyra, and that's basically because it'll take me a minute to generate the new set of memories for sights and sensations. So in this case, this is a way that I can sort of make the most of the time and not have to wait all that long to get everything loaded up. So here's sights and sensations. Now the first thing I want to do here is take the ones that Denzel might be generating for me. So that'll mean Solace, Hindsight, Regret, Storm. And we can add the Bittersweet Certainty, and then I guess it's my choice in terms of which of these I go for, but I think we'll do the Cheerful Ditty and the Savage Hymn. And then we apply the Whist that we set aside. At last, I approach Mastery. Improve the skill to level 8. So what's nice here is I know I only need 6 memories to move us up to the next one. I'm also just going to take a second here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're good to go to move up Resurgences and Emergences. So at this point, I don't necessarily need to get clever and, do anything at the various instruments. I can if I want, but it's a matter of taste at this point rather than necessity. So here we will apply the core, I think. Oh no, we've got some. Well, no, it's about the same around this point. So let's just going to figure out how I want to do this. I think I'm going to do this in the reverse order and skip anything that Denzel might generate for me. So we'll go for Glimmerings here. Beguiling Melody was next, but I think I'll give that one a rest, just for everybody's sanity. We can afford the Whist at the Pale Desk. So, Salt. Could give me Prisoner Records. Confounding parables next. So I believe that's 3. I think we can afford a Faust in this case now. And then we wind up with the music. So we've got, we need 6. I'm just going to remember 1, 2, 3. Okay. Four. And then six. So that should mean that the rest of these are available for any other purpose. Obviously, it won't hurt to leave this set aside. Well, we can do, I think we can do a little bit more. So maybe what I'll do is I'll take the Fet and I'll use that to do the, maybe the Fet and the Tryst, I'll use that to handle something like Crowcross Sands. Oh, hello. Yeah, there we go. I think I'll use a few of these to do some exploration. Actually, you know what? We can spend a little more time on this. Just trying to make a little bit more of the day as I can. And then we also have some time for gardening. I think we'll take a trip to the beehive. I guess we don't really need any more pears right now. All right. We don't exactly need vegetables, but it's an opportunity, so I'll take it. All right, so we're going to be going a little bit over tonight, but I think it's nice to be able to queue up the relevant skills. So what I'll do here is we'll save the final Sacralamea for... Oop, he does a lot with silence, this man. We'll queue up the last round for sights and sensations, so that will take care of that on Monday's episode. But following that, we will we'll level up the Tridesma Hira. The skill is now level 8. Its power aspects have also increased. Okay, Tridesma Hira. So this clears us for any of those memories that we're generating right now. And then in 30 seconds, the expectation is we will have the relevant memories. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to be able to turn sights and sensations into a level 9. But I'm going to save that for the next stream just because we will actually be following some of the... we'll maybe want to be focusing a little bit on some of the text that we see from those books that we're reading. In terms of some future plans, so a lot of this is going to rest on what happens Numa-wise. So once we've locked in the extra level, so that happens in 30 seconds, we're going to have a few elements of the soul to play around with cooking. So this is good for the cooker bit. This is good. Yeah, so we've got one shaft that's open, and then we've got 3 to do some cooking with, so I can at least get a head start on work for the salon. The other possibility is I can try and generate if I really think I've got a Numa coming up, I can actually generate at least one more persistent memory. That would be to talk to the Stimfling. But of course, if I talk to the Stimfling, that means I'm also going to want to talk to one of the chickens to get an egg to be able to get it back. And of course, we also have the wild viper. We've got a few different. We actually have a few different ways of spending that time. So I don't really know if I want to. I don't know. There's a lot of things that I can spend my time on. I'm just not sure that one is the best use of my time. We'll see. I think a lot of this is going to depend on how I feel on Monday. But we have there's a pretty clear set of priorities depending on how the next season turns out. So if it's Numa, what we'll try and do is we'll try and find a skill to break. So I think I kept a 5 set aside for the possibility of a future Numa. Looks like Hill and Hollow. Maybe Oronoscopy would be better. Obviously, I'll have a bit of a think about which of these I break apart. But the idea would be is that we can take the opportunity in Numa to break down and rebuild one of my skills. And then the real hope, if we wind up with Numa, on top of the things that I'm already sort of planning on doing, like finally resolving Spencer Hobson's story and such, I think the real thing that I'm going to want to focus on will be all of these lower level skills where I have the opportunity to bring them sort of to a certain floor. I want to take those opportunities because, as I've sort of been saying before, we have the high level where you kind of see how we're handling this nice big set of reserves that I have. I'm sort of able to turn those into level 9s without too much trouble. And in fact, we were able to do so with a fairly high degree of precision. So, we have a handful of elements of the soul left over today, but we were able to get 2 skills up to level 9 without really breaking a sweat. So we'll still continue to kind of turn the dials as we move down this list. But Numa provides us an opportunity to really go nuts with a bunch of extra lessons and to just be able to push ahead some of the things that maybe were lagging a little bit. And then that will inform some of the later decisions in terms of what is or isn't difficult in terms of moving up certain things. So for instance, the Shaven Lock Tantra gives me Rites of the Roots, and so does Serpent Root. But I've learned that there are a few like Stone Stories and other skills which use, so Rites of the Roots is actually already committed, but there's things like Stone Stories which have a scale and nectar, and it might not be a bad idea for me to think about exactly how I'm managing those individual challenges or those individual upgrades, just because the lessons are harder to come by. So the easy thing to say is try and get some of those earlier ones. So Rites of the Roots is the best example just because it's at level 3, but again, it's already committed. But if I had a Rites of the Roots, which I knew I wanted to bring up higher, maybe take the opportunity in Numa to move it a few levels up, and that way those fairly precious Rites of the Roots levels through the Shaven Lock Tantra, those are available to me to sort of bring it over that last mile. Anyways, that's it for this week. Thank you everyone for watching, and I believe if the timings work out correctly that we got to celebrate Canada Day on the 1st, but today should be July the 4th, so happy Independence Day to my American viewers. And I wish I was a little bit better at doing this for all of the other major dates for all the other countries, but I'm a North American, which means I only have a couple of major dates to remember when it comes to other nations. Bastille Day is coming up, though, so maybe I'll try and remember that. Anyways, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you Monday to wrap up the summer in-game. See you then.